അല്ല സ്പീക്കർ വെൽക്കം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞായിരുന്നോ? വെൽക്കം സാർ. അങ്ങനെ ഇരിക്കണം. എല്ലാവരും മാസ്ക് മാറ്റിയിട്ടില്ല. മാസ്ക് ഫുൾ സ്വിങ്ങിൽ ഇരുന്നോ? വന്നിട്ട് വെച്ചാൽ മതി. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes. Balsar വന്നോ? Balsar വന്നാലേ തുടങ്ങാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. ഞാൻ സാറിനാണ് കൊടുക്കുന്നത്.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. This is Professor Devika. Am I audible?
Audible, madam.
Thank you. So can I just test my slides now? Do we? Oh no, it's already time. It's okay.
Countdown തുടങ്ങിയിട്ടുണ്ട്.
താങ്കൾ വിളിച്ച നമ്പർ ഇപ്പോൾ
Sir, you are muted. Sir, you are muted. Good evening. We are extremely happy to welcome the dignitaries and scholars who have accepted our invitation to participate in the higher education session of the Kerala Look Ahead International Conference. It is well known that Kerala is a state with very high achievements in education. We have achieved total literacy much ahead of other Indian states, as well as the developing part of the world. Our gross enrollment rate is very high and the drop rate is very negligible. During the last 5 years, the government of Kerala had taken several steps to revamp the education sector in Kerala. As far as the functioning of the school education system, in a mission mode, through the public education improvement campaign, the school education system was revamped. IT-enabled pedagogy was introduced in schools, providing them with smart classrooms and other infrastructure facilities. The results are palpable in that more than 100,000 students have shifted their education from the private unaided schools to the public schools, indicating the vibrancy and social acceptance of the public education system. As far as the higher education sector is concerned, we have presently 15 state universities. Very recently, we have started the Kerala University of Digital Sciences and the Open Universities. And also we have 2 central universities and 5 deemed universities. Around 2,500 colleges are affiliated to the various universities in Kerala. There are large number of research institutes of national and international repute in Kerala, both under the central as well as the state government. These include research institutes of international reputes like Vikram Sarabhai Space Science Center, the National Institute of Interdisciplinary Studies, the Rajiv Gandhi Center of Biotechnology under the central government, and institutes like Tropical Botanical Garden and Research Institute, Kerala Forest Research Institutes, and a number of other research institutes under the state government. In fact, Kerala has perhaps the highest density of research institutes in India. Kerala, therefore, is eminently suited for advanced knowledge production and research. In the last budget, our Finance Minister, Dr. Thomas Isaac, has included projects to make Kerala a knowledge economy and also introduced projects to usher in a digital equity in the state. However, we are acutely aware that we have yet to fully exploit these possibilities to achieve higher education, academic excellence in higher education, commiserate with the global standards. We are currently seeking the advice and suggestions from various agencies and scholars from within India and outside to revamp our higher education sector. This session is part of our attempt to get new ideas from scholars so as to develop a roadmap for the further development of the higher education sector in the state. I am delighted to welcome our Honorable Higher Education Minister, Dr. K.T. Jalil, who will be inaugurating the session. I wholeheartedly welcome Dr. Rajan Gurukal, the Vice Chairperson of the State Higher Education Council, who will be chairing the session. 7 eminent erudite scholars with a wide experience in various fields will be presenting papers in the session. Professor Gopinath Ravindran, Vice Chancellor of Kannur University, Professor Ronald J. Herring, Professor Emeritus, the Department of Government, Cornell University, New York, Professor N.V. Varghese, Vice Chancellor, National Institute of Education Planning and Administration, Professor Shyam B. Menon of the Central Institute of Education, University of Delhi, Professor Daniel Little, Sociology and Public Policy, University of Michigan, Professor Devika P. Madari, Documentation Research and Training Center, Indian Statistical Institute, Bengaluru, Professor Suhadot Thorat, Professor Emeritus Center for the Study of Regional Development Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru Universities will be presenting papers. Dr. K.P. Sudhir, Executive Vice President of the Kerala Council of Science, Technology and Environment will respond to the views aired by the scholars. I cordially welcome these esteemed scholars who have kindly accepted the invitation to make presentations here. Also, with immense pleasure, let me welcome the Vice Chancellors, the academics and students from various universities and affiliated colleges who are attending the session, accepting our invitation. And we expect a fruitful and productive discussion with participation from the audience after the presentation of these papers. May I now request Dr. Rajan Gurukal to chair the session and conduct the proceedings. Thank you very much. Sir, you are muted. Gurukal sir, you are muted. Please unmute.
Yes. Am I audible now?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You can proceed.
Honorable Minister for Higher Education, Dr. K.T. Jalil, respected Member Planning Board, Dr. Iqbal, fellow speakers, Vice Chancellors, researchers, students, and others. Now, I would now request Honorable Minister for Higher Education, Dr. K.T. Jalil, to deliver the inaugural lecture.
It seems that the minister is muted.
Sometimes the host is muting. It happened in my case. I get the intimation that the host has muted the microphone. So that also has to be checked.
We will look into it, sir.
Yeah. Excuse me, is somebody contacting Dr. Jalil? I think Honorable Minister is not able to hear us. Will anybody please find out? Minister is present, but either his microphone is muted or he is not able to hear us.
Dr. Bindu, the minister tells that his computer shows that the host has muted him.
That is happening.
Can you please check, Bindu? Varghese, can you check? His computer shows that the host has muted him. I am sorry, this happens in such webinars. Please excuse us.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We are.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry for the delay.
Thank you.
We are really sorry for the delay.
The most distinguished guests, those who are attending in the international conference and the consultation on higher education. The world has changed. No conference anywhere in the world can be begun without ignoring this fact. The impact COVID-19 virus has made is so dramatic and quick that the world has now been divided into pre-COVID and post-COVID eras. Like all else in the world, higher education in Kerala and India too are going through a deeply troubling and disorienting period. Higher education is not typically recognized for agility and speed. Yet, the immediate and heroic response by our universities and institutions is impressive. We have finished the exams and declared the results without much delay. Undergraduate and postgraduate classes commenced in June itself. The government has increased the seats at both postgraduate and undergraduate levels in thousands. New generation programs have been announced. recruited teachers at all levels of education in numbers more than ever. Digital infrastructure facilities have been enhanced. As a community, the students, parents, and teachers all have shown remarkable resilience and stood by government decisions. In the last 6-7 months, we have shifted rapidly from traditional classroom setups to remote teaching modes, remote learning, developed digital classrooms, and digital assessment techniques. The current scenario presents both an opportunity and an imperative for our education system to learn from COVID-19 and improve our preparedness and response for future emergencies. When we think of the next academic year, students have lost a substantial amount of time outside the campuses. There are delays and gaps in academic progress as the conventional learning routines are disrupted and the transitions to virtual instruction are understandably rolled out rather unexpectedly. Now the academia requires to think differently about how students are assessed and placed, and about teachers' pedagogical approaches and evaluations. We all know that learning loss will not be consistent. It will likely be even more severe on educationally disadvantaged students. Students without access to technology and those who deserve specialized support and services in institutions, such as students with special skills. As we look forward a post-COVID-19 era, we envisage that our educational growth will be made possible by technology innovation and digital transformation. It is almost certain that the future of learning will almost certainly be blended. And there is little chance that we will go back to the past model where digital is an add-on or simply used for distance learning. The crisis has also clearly shown the need for face-to-face classroom engagement as well. We would definitely devise new and innovative infrastructure, replacing traditional auditoriums, classrooms, and laboratories. For example, brainstorming discussion groups, learning rooms, or other types of laboratories equipped with augmented reality, flip charts, and touch screens. We already see this in the innovation sector, but these ideas will likely spill over to learning and research infrastructures. When we think about future research at the university level and beyond, we need to proactively promote open science across all fields to meet the next global crisis, which may not be pandemic, but anything which is unforeseen and unforeseeable. We understand that governments have a role in establishing common platforms and data facilities accessible to all stakeholders. The future of mankind relies on sharing data and results openly and between disciplines. Benefits of this interdisciplinary approach in dealing with big challenges is seen in the fight against COVID-19 virus. It was not confronted as a virology challenge, contributions from almost all disciplines of humane knowledge have been utilized for controlling the spread and menace of this deadly pandemic. Our future researchers need to have multicultural and multidisciplinary communication skills in order to work together. This crisis has also shown us some potential path for the future and has made us think about who we are and where we stand. It is in scenarios like these where governments look towards expert institutions like the State Planning Board for direction and advice, and sure that the outcome of conferences like this will be worthy of bettering the lives of common man, the lives of common man in the state. I congratulate State Planning Board to organize the conferences like this. With these words, I inaugurate this international conference and consultation on higher education. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Honorable Minister. That was certainly a good beginning with full of insights. Now, I hope that the fellow speakers are aware of the timing which was already notified. Now, by way of the introduction, let me say a few words. Honorable Minister for Higher Education, Dr. K.T. Jalil.
Can those who are not speaking please mute their mics?
Respected Member Planning Board, Dr. Fellow speakers, I hope Honorable Vice Chairman of the Planning Board, Dr. V.K. Ramchandran, is also online. Other listeners, and now as few words from the chair. Looking ahead of Kerala's higher education, the target is attainment of excellence. Nobody has any doubt about that. We have been adopting various ways to forge ahead, but still long way off from the goal. And most of you know the reasons. Now I feel that the efforts must be more pointed means actually, than general ways. What do our universities lack must be the question. Now, compared to a world-class university, what do we really lack? Now, we lack critical mass consisting of national and international diversity among teachers and students, which you find satisfied in the case of any of the important universities the world over. Then multidisciplinary character, interdisciplinary programs, network of world-famous universities and experts, intellectual property contribution, heritage of globally entrenched academic conventions, making the university a demanding institution. Inescapably demanding, that's what I mean, inescapably demanding for teachers as well as students. And then the institution's local rootedness. Now we can double the intake of students and faculty positions, ensuring worldwide representation to make the critical mass component with diversity satisfied. our universities are mostly multidisciplinary, but lost in disciplinary silos, hence least interdisciplinary. Our institutional network is bad and intellectual property contribution abysmally poor. Heritage cannot be built up overnight. So that component we will have to compensate in various other ways. Our universities must lay down ways and means of turning them into demanding institutions. Teachers and students shouldn't take the institution for granted. Each university should design, implement, and entrench inviolable routines to turn themselves into institutions of high academic demands from their clientele. We must strengthen our academic practices by debureaucratizing and decentralizing them, which alone can ensure the institutional environment of quality teaching and learning, enabling teachers and students to maximize their academic ingenuity. So once these issues are taken care, automatically the institution would be an ideal environment for learning and teaching. This effort of genuine and committed involvement alone can enhance quality and standards. This alone can lead our institutions, universities and colleges eligible for international collaboration in the field of research in emerging areas. Now, we see this in the case of some universities which have already satisfied this. For example, Mahatma Gandhi University has been successful in entering into research collaborations with very prestigious universities abroad. Now, that kind of networking is extremely important for a university to be an accomplished institution. Now, this alone will enable us to produce new knowledge and facilitate intellectual property contribution. We talk about knowledge society too much. In every document, we see this. Our new education policy talks about sustainable and equitable transformation of the nation into knowledge society. I do not know what does that mean, sustainable and equitable transformation into knowledge society. Knowledge society is primarily knowledge consuming society. We have to grow as a knowledge economy and producing intellectual assets or intangible assets and exchange them. And that's the global economy. That is what the global economy is doing. The Honorable Chief Minister now emphasizes knowledge economy. We can be participants in knowledge economy only if our universities and research institutions generate exchangeable intellectual property. All this can happen if the academic community is determined to maximize their faculty, maximize their intellectual acumen. It requires moral compulsion, economic patronage, and pressure from the government. So system should also exert some pressure on teachers and students. And collective efforts in the dimension of a movement. These are the initial points that I would like to make. Now, I'll pass on to the next speaker. May I now invite Professor Gopinath Ravindran, Vice Chancellor, Kannur University. Professor Ravindran, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Gurukul. At the outset, let me thank Professor Ramachandran and the Kerala State Planning Board for inviting me to participate in this session of the conference. Now, I begin my brief presentation on curricular innovations with two prefatory comments. First, I'm not a trained educationist like Professor Varghese and Professor Menon here. I have been a teacher for most of my working life, and have studied and taught outside Kerala. For the last 3 years, I've had an opportunity to work in one of the 5 multidisciplinary universities in Kerala. So I draw upon this experience to suggest what ails curricula in higher education in Kerala and possible reforms or innovations. So as mentioned yesterday, Kerala has had a long and successful record of public action, which has made it possible to achieve very high indices in the field of public health, education, poverty alleviation, decentralized government, and social equity. As Professor Iqbal mentioned at the outset, school education is doing very well. And the government support for schools, as well as for students in the higher education sector, far exceeds what is given by the central government. Now, Kerala's public funding of higher education has been higher than that of all the larger states. And state-funded scholarships in Kerala are also amongst the highest. Similarly, female enrollment in higher education is way greater than the national average. And Kerala's official gross enrollment ratio of 37, which I think is an underestimate, is substantially above the national GERs of around 26. Now, I reiterate these facts not to eulogize the development achievements of Kerala or the achievements of the government, but merely to assert that the necessary conditions for making the state known for excellence in higher education, these necessary conditions are available, they are present. Now, that said, at present, Kerala is not known for its universities or centers of advanced research. Professor Iqbal did list out a large number of research centers, but I suspect many of them are controlled by the center. And within the university ecosystem, I don't think very, very important and remarkable research advanced research has taken place. Now, there is not a single university in the state which finds a place amongst the top 10 in the National Institutional Ranking Framework or with an A+ grade given by another rating agency, which is the National Assessment and Accreditation Council of India. So this is the state, and these are just 2 examples where you can actually see how the state fares amongst all the universities in the country. Now, in the last last 2 months, we've been conducting interviews for hiring academic staff. And I found that the best candidates applying for teaching jobs in the state are usually those who are returning after having studied in universities, colleges, or working in research institutions outside the Kerala. So with remittances from the GCC countries set to decline and digital tools based on artificial intelligence threatening to make redundant most of routine lower and middle level jobs, the need for reforming and innovating higher education has become an immediate task and necessity. Now, what the present flu pandemic has done is that it has brought into focus and accentuated existing trends in higher education as in other sectors. Now, online teaching, which was being promoted for some years, has sharply accelerated. Public funded, large universities are facing the prospect of having to downsize, and the students' cost of education is increasing. And with the increased use of massive open online courses, there's a presentation on this later, so I won't go into details, the need for teachers may decline in the future. Now, with the rise of the virtual campus, social sciences and liberal arts face the threat of being relegated to the realm of the online, as opposed to many of the science tech disciplines. So, this is the state that we find ourselves in today. Now, the university is one of the oldest institutional organizations in world history, which has survived huge transformations without fundamentally changing the way in which knowledge was produced and disseminated. So, today's challenges before the world as a whole, whether from the pandemic, from the virus, or from economic changes, the university is forced to change. In India, the direction and speed of change has been dictated by the state via national education policies, administrative fields of regulatory bodies, which in turn reflect what the economy and the political economy of the country desires. So, what do we do? In Kerala, we have to immediately start off overhauling our curriculum. The government, as has been mentioned, has put in a lot of money in terms of infrastructure, providing teachers, and even providing new programs of study at a time when higher education is being downsized in many other parts of the country and the world. But despite all this, if we do not bring about curricular changes, I think all this investment of scarce resources into the sector will not yield the desired the desired goals will not be met. Now let me I will just look at 2 or 3 aspects of curriculum here. One is the syllabus. Now the syllabi of most universities in Kerala take the form of a long list of topics. It's almost as if it's written in some kind of a telegraphic order, and you have to code and you have to make sense of it. Reading lists are dated, bibliographic details are more often than not incomplete. In the majority of universities, the syllabi are not published on the university website. There are no stated program or course objectives or program objectives and outcomes. And most disciplinary programs contain nothing in their syllabi on how these disciplines are developed over time and why a list of topics has been put together in the form of a syllabus for a course of study. So these are things that universities have to think about. And this syllabus, as is common practice everywhere, is recommended by a board of studies. Now, this board of studies, unfortunately, doesn't have many senior scholars or experts from outside that particular university sitting on these committees. Similarly, we have, for the same degree in Kerala, different sets of syllabi and evaluation patterns. Evaluation and assessment, other than the syllabus, is another important component of the curriculum. Now, students in Kerala are compelled to answer a very large number of questions in the examinations in a 3-hour exam. Nearly a third of them being quiz-like, simple, multiple choice questions. Even the long form essay questions only test recall. And despite continuous evaluation being accepted in the state, it is possible for a student in some of the universities here to fail or get no marks in internal assessment and still be able to secure a degree. Students are also entitled to moderation marks, as well as moderation marks allow them to pass. So a certain number of marks is given to let them pass, and then grace marks for extracurricular activities. What all this, when taken together, means is that it becomes possible for a student to obtain a degree despite having secured much less than the mandated minimum. So when Professor Rajan Gurukul just spoke about we should have inviolable rules and the university should not be taken for granted by the students and teachers, I think that is a very important point which we somehow have to get across to these communities. Now, in Kerala, following UGC regulations, absolute marks were replaced with letter grades. But marking is still done in the old way and then converted into grades, defeating the entire purpose of grading. Again, in most places, mandatory plagiarism checks have not been introduced for student-submitted essays and reports. Given this state of course content and evaluation, before thinking of innovations, I think Kerala first has to accept and practice the extent best practices in curriculum development and implementation. Once we do that, we can think of innovating, making significant innovations. And in my experience of working in Kerala, making changes in curricula, I found, was not a very difficult task. When the limitations of the existing syllabi and examination questions were discussed with teachers, they were quite enthusiastic in making changes. In my university, after a series of meetings with teachers, and this is where the politics of the state becomes important, because of the very strong association politics here, it's very difficult, it's very easy to call groups together, and once you discuss it with these groups, we can quickly move ahead. So after a series of meetings, we were able to thoroughly revise with clear program and course objectives and expected outcomes the undergraduate and postgraduate syllabi in Kannur. And we also made sure that these were in alignment with the graduate attributes adopted by the university. Now, the poor quality of syllabi and examination questions, in my view, is largely due to teachers' lack of exposure to best practices within and outside the state. This could easily be remedied by universities and the Higher Education Council by providing a database of scholars who agree to offer their expertise in helping Kerala out with different aspects of curriculum development. Modeled syllabi and regularly updated theme-wise learning and research resources could also be publicly shared. Taking advantage of this international meeting today, we could begin planning to set up a national and global network of scholars who are willing to share their domain expertise in helping Kerala to update their disciplinary curricula. And I don't have much time, so I just flagged with one very disturbing fact that social sciences are in a terrible state in Kerala, and it's in a much worse state than sciences. Sciences have done relatively much better in terms of curricula and overall academic development and growth. So, and if this is what is going to happen to social sciences, it's very alarming, because the way social sciences is taught in schools and colleges and universities has a major role to play in ensuring that Kerala can continue and sustain its engagement with secular and democratic politics and a social plurality. So we have to teach students on how to learn and think critically. And this, I think, has to come, social sciences has to plays a major role here. Now, coming to interdisciplinary curriculum, which is has been a buzzword for a long time, or for some time. I think this interdisciplinary versus disciplinary is not a very helpful dichotomy, and it's not really tenable. All disciplines, I think, have changed in the course of their development. They have borrowed from others. And I don't think any discipline has led isolated, charted out an isolated path of growth. So interdisciplines, in fact, have existed long before interdisciplinarity became de rigueur. And interdisciplinarity also does not mean that the learner will be equally proficient in all the disciplines contributing to the interdisciplines. It's just not possible. So while pushing for greater contribution of different departments in the transacting of teaching, that is something we should do. We should look at themes which are interdisciplinary and offer them to students in different disciplines. And we should also allay the fears of teachers that the departments will be reduced in strength with the growth of interdisciplinary teaching. And I think I'm running out of time. So I'll just make the last point is, one is on science tech, that science, I said, is doing much better than the social sciences and humanities. But at the same time, we find that many of the applied areas are doing very well. But fundamental research is not really a very important, significant component of science teaching and research in the university system of Kerala. And this is something, although we are all aware that very few students would come into fundamental science research, but still the state should make provision for that as we try to take higher education forward. The last point I want to make is of MOOCs. Professor Herring here is going to do a much more elaborate presentation on MOOCs. But I'm a bit scared of MOOCs. You know, when university finances are going down, there's a resource crunch. It's quite possible that faced with few teachers and dwindling income, universities might, the managers and decision makers might push MOOCs as the way, as the solution. This has already been done because we've already been asked to introduce MOOCs in a big way. And but I think MOOCs is important. It's important because it's better than having no teachers, or better than having underqualified and teachers without the requisite competence. But the MOOCs has also changed over time from its early instructivist beginnings to now we have connected MOOCs and other variations of MOOCs, which seem to address many of the initial criticisms leveled against it. But still, I think if we can offer MOOCs in universities, along with a teaching assistant or a faculty member to advise these students, I think that will help us in taking things forward. So finally, if Kerala does not quickly respond to many of these serious problems of its higher education system, students who have the economic means will soon abandon the public university system for private colleges and universities with a promise of immediate employment, that promise immediate employment without being concerned with larger questions of equitable and socially inclusive promotion of critical knowledge creation. So we do not have any more time to lose, and we have to seriously get down to trying to make changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gopinath, for this insightful appraisal. Now, I invite Professor Ronald J. Herring from the Department of Government, Cornell University, New York. Professor Ronald Herring, please. Professor Herring, were you able to hear us?
The host has disabled screen sharing. Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Yes, now you're audible.
Good.
Now, this is becoming a repeated complaint that why the host is switching off the microphone.
No, sir, it's on, no?
Huh,
can't
now it is
share his
on, but
screen.
it happened.
No, he need to be given the privileges of sharing the screen.
Right.
Yeah, please.
That's what I need. Can you share my screen, please?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It hasn't come.
Okay, well. I'm not sure what to do in that case.
I think the host can make him a co-host.
Yes, make me a co-host.
Whoever is controlling, please make him a co-host.
Yes.
Rather, make all the speakers co-host so that they don't have.
Yeah, all the speakers are co-hosts, sir. All the speakers are co-hosts. I don't know what's the problem then.
Okay, well, let's try this. Can you see what's on my screen?
No, sir. No, sir.
Screen is not shared.
I don't know. I clicked on screen share. I don't know what to do next.
No, we have your presentation. So if somebody here could present it, can that be done?
Well, yes, but why not just share the screen? We've done that. It's the way we usually teach. Okay, let's see. Let's try starting the slideshow.
Normally, screen sharing is not much of a problem. I don't know what is happening.
I don't know either. Sorry.
Could I make a comment? I think you're getting feedback because you have two sessions open, audio feedback.
Could be.
Yes, sir. The presentation can be shared here also. If you are not able to do that.
Yeah, please do that then.
Yeah, we'll do that, sir, then.
Yeah. What is important is that the viewers should be able to see the screen. Now, you can share it from here.
He's already co-host, but I don't know what's the reason to. Now here we are sharing.
Yeah, but even I know I'm not able to see it. Is the shared screen visible to others?
No.
No.
So sharing is not taking place.
Sir, we are doing, sir. We are doing.
Dr. Bindu,
sir, we are trying, sir. Because of some technical issues, we are not able to do that for the time being. Can we go to the next speaker now?
Sorry, Professor Ronald. Shall we go to the next speaker? Meanwhile, I hope we'll be able to make the sharing clear. Bindu, is it because the main screen is showing the seminar seminar common logo and that an announcement. If you can withdraw that, perhaps the sharing will work.
Yes, sir. Let me try that.
Because that seminar, the main thing is remaining there. I think maybe your screen is using it. Shall I wait for Ronald or shall I go to the next speaker? Dr. Bindu, will you be able to do it immediately or shall I go to the next speaker? I think the host microphone is not working.
Can we go to the next speaker? They are trying, but they are not able to do that now.
Okay. Now I call upon Professor N.V. Verghese.
Oh, sorry, sir. Sorry.
The next speaker. Professor Verghese.
So can I speak now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
So good evening to all of you. Thank you, Dr. Ramachandran, for the invitation and Professor Rajan Gurikal for chairing. It's a pleasure to be with the fellow panelists. Friends, I am given the topic to talk about institutional innovations. That is what I was given. So let me take the next 15 minutes to speak about that, talk about that. And Professor Rajan Gurikal, I request you that when you have 2 minutes left, you can show me your hand. I will confine to the time that is allocated to me. And so it's indeed a great pleasure to be here to talk about higher education development in a state where education is one of the most developed in the country. And not only that, the higher education is developed, but also there is an equity dimension to this development, unlike in many other states. In many other states, we find that the development takes place, the progress in education takes place, but there is a widening of inequalities. That is not the case. And Kerala, like in the economic field and the social field, has succeeded in marrying equity with expansion. And that's a very positive change. Professor Rajan Gurikal mentioned about excellence, the issue related to excellence. I think that is the major issue. That's the critical issue. That's a crucial issue of higher education development in Kerala. Let me just say that if you look at the reforms in higher education in globally, India or in Kerala, one finds certain trends. Initially, in the post-independence period in India, and also after the formation of Kerala after 1956, when the first government came to power, what we find is that there was a model of development of education in general and that of higher education in particular, which was public funding, state control framework for higher education development. This was the pattern of development that we had. But what we find is that in the 1980s onwards, there is a move towards a little more market-friendly reforms in general. That is also reflected in Kerala. And I think the policy changes were fueled by reforms in 3 domains, which is very important to note. One, the reforms to expand the system. And in the context of Kerala, this is very important because there are 2 trends that we find. One is the privatization of public institutions that took place. And secondly, also the promotion of private sector. What I mean to say is the self-financing sector that came into existence. What you find is substantially important dimension of this change that has taken place in Kerala, and that has accelerated the process of growth in higher education, and also it has accelerated the process of distortion in the development of higher education between different disciplines. You find that self-financing courses were mostly monodiscipline institutions that came up in a big way, and that also has had dimensions related to the lopsided development of different disciplines in higher education. And the employment aspect is certainly another dimension, which I'll touch upon at a later stage. The second type of reforms was reforms to improve quality. In general, what we talk about is the accreditation and ranking that is taking place in most of the cases. Unfortunately, Kerala is not doing that well in ranking. Even by the NIRF ranking of 2020, Kerala University is the top ranked one with from Kerala, that is number 23rd. And you find that MG University is 30 and Calicut University is 54, and Cochin University is 62. So we are not closer to, as it was pointed out by Professor Iqbal, we are not close to 10 or even the first 21, you know. So there is a scope for improving, so quality. And one of the third type of reforms were related to improving the relevance and the skill formation dimension. And if you see the self-financing colleges, it started both in the public sector and also in the private sector. What one finds is that this was indirectly questioning or trying to look at the issues related to relevance of what is being taught when employment becomes one of the concerns. What is to be understood or what is to be underlined is the fact that when the system is getting massified, the demand for higher education for employment opportunities will be increasing in a bigger way. And therefore, we have to find alternative ways and mechanisms of the training of people for employment. This can be done in two ways. One is that the growth of the non-university sectors, you know. I am not talking about the college sector. Non-university sectors, that is one way of doing it. The other one is that introducing courses whereby we find that the relevance and also skill formation can be done. But it seems that Kerala followed a pattern of having these courses incorporated as separate institutions and entities, and mostly in the private sector, although this self-financing process started in the public institutions, it went to that. And what are the implications of this type of changes for the institutional innovations? Because the institutional innovations in Kerala, or in higher education, the demand for that and the process and the pressures for that comes from three sources in my view. One is that increasing student diversity. Although the progress of higher education was also more aligned with equity in Kerala when compared with other states, but there was a difficulty that was coming because of the over-dominance of the self-financing institutions and private institutions. I am not talking about the aided colleges, but the unaided colleges. What one finds is that the nature of student composition changed, and you find that many of the public institutions in Kerala, which means the government colleges in Kerala, became a majority from the disadvantaged groups. A larger proportion of the students from the disadvantaged groups started coming to the college education in the public sector, you know. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. What I mean to say is that the diversity, student diversity has increased, but we did not have any mechanisms to address the issues of diversity at the college level, even at the university level. The second one is that changing parental priority on returns to investment. This is very important. And that is one of the reasons why we find that a large number of self-financing colleges came into existence. And at that point of time, there was a political dilemma. Perhaps whether we should encourage the private institutions or private parties to establish institutions, then there was another issue. Equally important is that a large number of Indian students from Kerala were going outside, especially to Tamil Nadu or Karnataka for different types of courses which were job-oriented. So therefore, there was an implied urgency or pressure for Kerala government also to establish or support the institution of or expansion of these institutions. But unfortunately, what we find is that some of the studies have very clearly indicated that when we look at the quality of education that is provided in most of the self-financing colleges, when compared with the government colleges and also the aided colleges, it is far below these type of arrangements, these type of situations. You know. And you find that if you go to the neighboring state of Tamil Nadu, what one finds is that institutions which are offering substandard classes or substandard courses and quality is very poor, these institutions are increasingly getting closed down. In Kerala, the phenomenon is that of closing down of aided schools and government schools at the primary level, but at the higher education level, this has not yet come. The third dimension, which is forcing institutional innovation, is mostly in terms of the changes in the financial model of and operating principles of institutions. Even in some of the even in some of the government institutions, what is also happening is that the transfer of grants from the government to these institutions are less than the salary bill of these institutions of the regular staff. So it has, some studies have come out and indicated the precarious situation which some of the institutions and the universities are providing. The RUSA plan that was prepared by the Kerala State Council of Higher Education, it's a very good plan. It envisages that the total allocations to higher education will be increased to 2% of the GDP. That's a very good step. But at the same time, what one also finds is that as of now, the situation is not very good. And secondly, in a state like Kerala, the role of the state needs to be redefined. And what should be the role of the state? Because a major share of the institutions and enrollment, more than 75 to 80%, are in the private sector. So how much public sector and public investment and public resources will be able to divert or give a clear direction to higher education is something that is to be looked into. Now, the question that is one finds is that many institutions have introduced many new market-friendly courses with the help of, or with the intention of mobilizing resources. As I mentioned, in many cases, this has led to the situations of disciplinary distortions. And you will also find that in some of the universities, many of the arts and science seats are lying vacant because most of the students from the well-to-do or middle-class families would like to go for a professional or a technical course in a private institution, even when facilities are available at a cheaper rate because of the employment orientation coming from the massification process that has taken place. The new education policy talks about universalization of higher education, reaching a target of gross enrollment ratios by 50% by the year 2035. But I don't think that this is a major issue in Kerala. Kerala has already achieved 37% of the GR is 37%. So it is a question of achieving another 13% within the period of next 15 years or 14 years. So I don't think that meeting that target, is not an issue. Perhaps Kerala may reach that target much faster. I think the institutional innovations, one is taking place, it was already mentioned, and I was waiting for Ronald Herring to talk about the massive open learning courses. So that will have a lot of implications because what is happening, as the Honorable Minister pointed out, one of the positive contributions of COVID is moving towards blended learning processes in many places. I think more and more online-based blended learning and flipped classrooms will become one of the conditions to improve teaching learning process in the classrooms. And one of the important change that is taking place in terms of the teaching learning process is that while teaching learning process used to be something that used to be transacted between the teacher and the student, today, it is a globally connected activity and many institutions. We have studied some of these institutions. What one finds is that the best video lectures are presented in the class and the teachers try to animate a discussion based on these type of lectures which are delivered. So, and this contributes more to the increased or improved learning process that takes place. I feel that it is not only the online classes that takes place, but also the nature of classes and the way the classrooms will be organized will be undergoing dramatic change. Why I'm making this point is that many people talk about the change that is taking place to online mode as online classes or online courses, but I do not think so. What is taking place is only online transactions of the courses rather than is very well developed course structure and materials to provide a very good quality online courses. Another dimension of change that you find in the institutions is that, if I use a word, outsourcing. This has happened in Kerala. This has happened in many other institutions. When there is a funding shortage, what is happening is that the activities of the universities are getting outsourced. And what you find is that hostel facilities are getting outsourced, electricity facilities are getting outsourced, sports facilities are getting outsourced. And what is not acceptable is that teaching is also getting outsourced. The part-time teachers become more common. And in some of the universities in India, this is not applicable to Kerala because Kerala is doing much better than other states in terms of the vacant positions in case of teachers, less number of vacant positions in Kerala when compared to other states, so it is doing very well. So the subcontracting or outsourcing of many of the activities and the part-time teachers, these are the issues which really make a roadblock to our path towards excellence or our path towards improving quality, a path towards higher education becoming a world-class university or world-class institutions, you know. And it is very important to see that. I will make two more statements. One is, it can be controversial and debatable, but I don't mind, but I want to make this point. One of the issues that we find when we compare with the institutions in other places and we sit in the interview boards is that the articulation capacity of the students in English language is declining. And it becomes very difficult for many of the students in the colleges and in the universities, not only competing for jobs, but also getting used to the literature. I go back to what Ashokamitra Committee recommended in Kerala in 1998 to 99, if I remember correctly. It said that one has to make a distinction in the Kerala context. One has to make a distinction between medium of instruction and proficiency language. Medium of instruction may be mother tongue or the state language, which is Malayalam. But at the same time, that should not stop people from acquiring another language proficiency. And I think for Kerala, it is very important, given the fact that more than 24 million to 25 million nearly Keralites are living abroad, are expatriates living abroad. And it is very important that we do this. And this is very important, not only for employment, but also improving quality of education. Because unless the students are in a position to get used to read the materials, original materials, and so I'm not somebody propagating for English languages process, but I think when we are talking about the changes that you have to do. And another related point is that Kerala has immense scope to develop an education hub type of arrangement if we need, because we have a large share of people who are living in other countries, you know, NRIs, non-resident Indians. And perhaps this is something that can be capitalized if we improve quality of education. I will end by saying that the role of the state needs to be redefined. I think we have to accept the fact that even if we increase, as what the State Council of Higher Education has mentioned, about increasing the percentage of allocation of 2% of the state funding will not be able to resolve the issues of higher education in Kerala. So therefore, we need to redefine the role of the state more in terms of giving the regulations, framework for development, and permitting autonomy within the limits, you know, so that the institution can flourish and go ahead, rather than looking to the institutions or looking to the government and state funding as the only source of funding. So what I am talking about is the diversified source of funding, which needs to be regulated rather than making excessive profit. We should move away from education being treated as a commodity or educational investment being made as another sector or another area to maximize profit, to a situation whereby the cost recovery is possible from the students from the middle class families with a clear-cut idea and a framework that needs to be developed by the public authorities and the public institutions, you know. That will change the institutional framework in which institutions will operate, and that is one of the ways. And to end by saying that, going back to what Professor Radhim Gurukul mentioned about the excellence, and when you talk about world-class universities, what one finds is that there are 4 factors that are binding the world-class universities to make them world-class. One is excellent students. Second one is excellent teachers. Third one is that a large amount of money and unconstrained money, and also the autonomy for the institutions, you know. We cannot have all these in one go. But there is a process by which we should start and move towards this, you know. But the major contribution of higher education has been marrying equity with the progress that you have made. I think any effort towards excellence should also imply that equity and excellence are married. That is the way forward for Kerala. And when we look forward to Kerala as higher education development, and the State Council will be playing an important role. And this is the role that can be played to ensure that we move towards, and the roadmap is very clear. It is not only excellence for few, but it's an excellence combined with equity. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Varghese. That was really a very educative presentation. Now, may I now call Professor Ronald Herring? Sorry, Professor Ronald Herring, and the presentation
Still here.
Work now.
Can I share my screen now?
Yeah, please. I hope that it works.
Well, why shouldn't it work? I don't understand. I'm sorry, I don't understand why.
Sometimes technology is mysterious.
Okay, so this is self-view mute. No. What do I do? I do this. Nobody can see my screen. Can you see me?
Yes, we are about to see. There is some positive change.
Good. We teach this way now because everyone is quarantined. So it's a pretty common thing we do. Ah, look at this. Can anybody see that now?
I think I am not able to see, but
sir, it's okay, sir. It can be seen.
Yeah, it looks the sharing is working.
I have it up on my screen, but my screen is not sharing.
Yeah, Professor, please go ahead. Now I get the message that started screen sharing, although the screen hasn't appeared. But I think you can go ahead, it will come.
Sir, it's seen, sir. No problem.
Okay, please go ahead. Yes. It's visible for many.
It's legible. You can see it?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks. The topics so far have been extremely interesting and important. And I agree with the problems that have been raised, and I want to talk a little bit about some solutions. And I'm a big fan of MOOCs. I'd never done one before. I'd never taken one before, but I've become a MOOC because it's the most important educational experiences I've had as a teacher. And this is after 30 years of teaching at Cornell. So this is the definition of the MOOC, of course, is I want to go through the advantages, the disadvantages, and this is what we mean by massive. The course I want to talk about, can you see this screen? Screen's visible? Yes? No?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, good. Yes. So by massive, we had students from 144 countries. Others courses have had many more. We had more than 7,000 students in the first live offering, and it was free. Most MOOCs offer very inexpensive certification if you need certification, but you can take them free otherwise. And online, I have to emphasize, free, assuming high-speed internet connections, which of course is a huge issue of economic inequality. It's a big issue in the United States now because poor people don't have access to the kinds of online facility that would allow them to have their education move forward. So how did we get there? This is a question that I find interesting. It did take a large Cornell investment along with MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and others to create an institution called edX. This is edX.com, edX.org, global nonprofit, 510,750 people are taking courses on edX right now. So Cornell University support. First, we decided to do something called university courses. There are about a dozen of these a year. They're selected from faculty proposals. The university contributes faculty time and also contributes quite a bit of money. Outside speakers, free student dinners with faculties, TAs, all the rest. The first university course that we did was called the GMO Debate, Science and Society.
Sorry, sir, your presentation is not seen now. I think so.
What?
Your presentation is not seen now. Just it's gone.
Where did it go?
It disappeared from screen share.
I didn't change any setting. It just, can you see it now? Is it not visible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Started again.
Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. This is what I usually do. You sort of click on this and it moves slide to slide, right? This is now visible?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the first course we did as a university course. And the second time we offered it, I just want to note the kinds of collaboration that this required. Interdisciplinary is a buzzword, but to actually approach a real problem, like what is environment? Environment has aspects of all kinds of social and technical issues. So this is our university course. We have a combination, you can get credit in courses in plant biology, biology and society, crop and soil sciences, political science, international agriculture and rural development, plant breeding and genetics, and science and technology studies. So all of those courses, students can get credit for taking the university course. Then we, step 2 is that Cornell supports a MOOC teamwork, and this requires faculty release time, money, special support, videographers, TAs. This is a very expensive process, but when people say that education is expensive, I always say, consider the alternative, right? So the outcome was our Cornell X edX course called The Science and Politics of the GMO. And you can go and take this course. This is the connection. This is our advertising, which is the embarrassing part of this. You have to sell yourself. And so here I want to talk about the advantages that I found tremendous. The permanence of a MOOC. It's like a free textbook. It can be updated continuously, but it's always available online. Second, the interdisciplinarity of it is beyond anything you can do in a classroom. Third, you get a very diverse audience, which means the feedback among people in the audience and audience to faculty is extraordinary, and it represents a lot of wide experiences. I said we had students in 144 countries. Not all of them can talk at once, but you do have a tremendous potential for getting interaction of a sort you can't get anywhere else. Advantages too. It forces a kind of precision in presentation and documentation that you do not get in a classroom. We've all lectured, you know how sometimes you just say things that come into your head, you can't really document things properly. With a MOOC, you have to, because every word counts. Constructing tests in line allows teachers to correct the way they're teaching in real time. You can see what students got wrong, and you can correct it as you go forward and go back to things that were misunderstood. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Problems. The differing background and knowledge of students. This is a serious problem in any kind of course, but especially with MOOCs, because the diversity of the audience is so much greater. Language, it's a huge issue. We partially corrected the problem with English by having TAs in a number of countries who could facilitate the course in local languages. This is difficult to manage. We had help with the Alliance for Science program from the Gates Foundation, put a lot of money into exactly this kind of problematic. And so we did have TAs in a number of countries that could help, but that's not like having native language abilities on both sides of the screen. Evaluation of individual learning is hard. Again, you can partially correct this with TAs, but it's still going to be difficult. And then common denominators. It's hard to get everybody on the same page in a democratic.
Your presentation window again disappeared, sir.
Excuse me?
Presentation window again disappeared.
I can't hear you. Sorry, what did you say?
But we are able to comprehend.
Hello.
That shared presentation, no, that's not seen.
Yeah.
Is the slide visible?
No, sir. No, sir. Just gone.
Where did it go? I have it on my screen.
Yeah,
It's
now
not
it's
on your
okay.
screen?
Yeah, now we can see, sir.
I see. So there's just a lag. It's not that it's disappeared. It's just there's a lag.
No, you return to the general screen, and when you reinitiate, then you get the screen back.
Now we can see.
Okay, am I doing something wrong or not doing something wrong? I can't tell. Is it?
I think it's the software, Ron.
Software?
But also, it's making perfect sense. The slides are helpful, but your presentation is making perfect sense.
Okay, so downside of MOOCs. I've already mentioned the enormous commitment of time and resources, faculty time, as well as staff time. Second, the varying levels of student knowledge and expertise. That's a problem in any course, but it's especially a problem in MOOCs. Participation. This is, again, a huge problem in lecture courses, no matter how you teach a lecture course. But there is a platform that we use called Shindig, in which students are presented virtually and they can raise their hands and ask questions, and the other students can see them ask questions. So if you have TAs and the use of a software called Shindig, you can have virtual public forums with invited lecturers from anywhere in the world, and you can allow students to ask questions and participate. Again, limited by the number of students and the time that you have available. But as I said, this is my best educational experience I've ever had. This is the course. You can still take it. We haven't updated it because nobody has the time and energy to update courses continually. But I think it's still, it's valuable as kind of a textbook in a sense. Now, I said this is the best experience I've had. Why is it such a good experience? First of all, no university can have complete expertise. No department can have expertise to really address an interdisciplinary problem. No department is going to have everything you need to talk about the environment. This is a course that had to deal with philosophy of science, with agriculture, with plant genetics, all sorts of disciplines that you just cannot put together without this kind of collaboration. Now, the process of making the MOOC makes you realize your own biases, your own imprecision, your own jargon, because you're trying to construct something with people from other departments. We had an economist, plant breedings, genetics person, various kinds of people working in this course together. So all of us had to adjust the way that we talk, the way that we explain things, the kind of literature we use, such that it works together as a whole presentation that really is interdisciplinary. The world doesn't bend itself to 19th century German universities categories. Okay, now, also, there's a self-critical notion of this. Every word counts. You notice this when you see words put onto a screen that is going to be shared all over the world. And your colleagues will notice, what do you mean precisely by that? Do you really mean UV radiation, or do you mean UVA, UVB, or UVC? It makes a difference. And so you correct your jargon, you get rid of the kind of sloppy imprecision that we all fall into. And then, of course, there's collegiality in learning. You learn from your colleagues, and it creates a wonderful kind of collegiality. So thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions about our MOOC experience, but I urge you to think about MOOCs quite seriously as a way of addressing the deficiencies that are inherent in any university setting. No university can offer the kinds of specialized learning that students need these days. And the labor problem that was mentioned, this is a big issue in the United States. Universities would like to rely on outsourcing and buying in MOOCs and getting rid of faculty. It's certainly happening at many universities. And of course, the economic crisis has made it much worse. But there's a way to manage this fiscally. We don't have time to get into that, and every university has a different fiscal system. But there are ways to use expertise that's external to the university to complement and help in the university's own curriculum in a mutually shared kind of system. And I think that is manageable. And certainly teachers' unions are thinking about this very systematically in many parts of the world. So it is a risk that if administrators don't care about their faculty, they can certainly short shrift them. But if universities care about their faculty and faculty are participating in the decisions, the labor issues can be worked out. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was really a wonderful presentation. Sorry that sorry to be bothering you like this. Anyway, let me pass on to the next speaker, Professor Shyamdas V. Menon, Central Institute of Education, University of Delhi, former Vice Chancellor, Ambedkar University. Professor Shyam.
Thank you, Professor Gurukul. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yes.
Professor Rajan Gurukul, Dr. Iqbal, Dr. Jalil, my fellow panelists and participants, good evening. I thank the Kerala State Planning Board and its Vice Chairperson, Professor V.K. Ramachandran, for inviting me to be part of these 3 days collective deliberations, aptly titled Kerala Looks Ahead. India is at present going through a critical phase in her history, and therefore this is an opportune moment for Kerala to introspect and collect ideas about her possible trajectory ahead. I congratulate the Kerala State Planning Board for organizing this initiative. I hope this will be followed up with more intense and participative deliberations within various sectors of development and public life. Kerala has consistently been critically aware of her historic role of leading the rest of India and indeed the developing world, particularly by defining development in human terms and demonstrating that it is possible to achieve high indices of human.
I just hope that the technical thing didn't get in the way.
Will you please switch off your microphone, please, Professor Brunel? Yeah. Yeah.
It's possible to achieve. Yeah. Thank you. By demonstrating that it is possible to achieve high indices of human development, notwithstanding the challenging economic parameters and constraints posed by the density of population. Indeed, Kerala is resource rich. Its human resources are its greatest wealth. This is due largely to the heavy public investments wisely made at appropriate times in social sectors like health and school education, and in creating strong institutional structures of participative local governance. Having achieved remarkably high levels of access to school education till senior secondary level and arguably acceptable levels of quality therein, Kerala has been witnessing during the past 2 decades an unprecedented explosion of mass aspiration for quality higher education. Professor Verghese mentioned about this. In spite of the fact that Kerala has a large publicly funded higher education system, the diaspora of young Malayalis to the rest of India, particularly to the metropolitan centers seeking quality higher education, has increased exponentially. Previously, this influx used to be accounted for in terms of aspirations for quality postgraduate and professional education. However, during the past 2 decades, I see an increasingly large number of young people from Kerala enrolling in liberal undergraduate programs in renowned colleges of the University of Delhi, as well as in Jamia Millia Islamia. Here I am talking about only public institutions, and that too only in Delhi. But it must be the same pattern elsewhere as well. It's clear that the private costs incurred by the people of Kerala towards higher education of their children have increased over the years, and the bulk of this constitutes a net outflow of financial resources from Kerala to other states of India, as well as some to countries abroad. It is imperative, therefore, that there is a need for increased investment, both public and private, for creating a strong edifice of higher education of high quality in Kerala. Unitary universities need to be the focus, in my opinion. New possibilities in mobilizing funding from non-governmental sources needs to be explored, because it's very clear that in spite of the promise that has been made that 2% of the GDP will be allocated to education, probably there may be several constraints in that process. There's one other reason why it is imperative that Kerala has to take a lead in higher education. The Chief Minister in his inaugural address last evening said that Kerala is attempting to, and I quote, upgrade higher education to new standards of excellence, unquote. Also, Professor Stiglitz in his keynote address said that future would demand creation of higher level skills and creativity because artificial intelligence is poised to push human labor out of routine low skill jobs. Excellence and creativity can be nurtured only in an environment that is free of fear and insecurity, where independent and divergent thinking and free flow of ideas are possible and nurtured. At this critical juncture, everybody is looking up to Kerala to create and sustain such centers of excellence and creativity. It is a historic necessity for Kerala to establish, nurture, and preserve spaces for free and fearless engagement with creative and critical ideas. This is an important prerequisite for excellence. I am asked to speak about institutional innovations. I will talk only about public universities, and there again, my focus will be on liberal education. Much of what I say by way of possible ideas that may be explored in Kerala are the ones we had tried out with variable levels of success while setting up a public university for liberal education in Delhi. I was associated with the setting up of Ambedkar University, Delhi, where I served as Vice Chancellor for the first 10 years. My emphasis is on unitary universities, therefore. I believe that the affiliating system has outlived its relevance. In fact, in any kind of hierarchical structures which go by standardization and uniformity are inherently reinforcing an axis of power and control, and this is totally antithetical to collegiality and democratic functioning that are the essential characteristics of higher education. I also believe that an optimal size for a university is about 10 to 15,000 student strength. More than that, I think the effectiveness of its organizational efficiency and functioning comes down. I go by the basic definition of a university that it's a self-governing community of practitioners. There I go by the 19th century German view of universities. I would use practitioners as a broad category that includes scholars as well. Faculty is a community of expert practitioners and students are aspirant practitioners. The distinction between these two is diffuse, and in the years to come, it is likely to get increasingly blurred. The major distinction, however, is that while students are a flowing population, faculty is a relatively stable body. So it is the faculty more often than not that provides a sense of continuity to a university and ensures fidelity to its core institutional principles. So investing in an institution of excellence is first and foremost investing in its faculty. Attracting and retaining good faculty becomes the most important condition for ensuring excellence in a university. The system of hiring faculty needs to be drastically changed from what is conventional in Indian universities. If JNU, Jadavpur, or for that matter, AUD, Ambedkar University, could establish their reputation, it was first and foremost the free hand that the university leaders had in picking up their founding faculty. It is important not to bind oneself in terms of standard programs and then look out for faculty to fit snugly into the niches of those programs. Instead, the correct approach would be, in my opinion, to identify a bright set of faculty in each broad area of knowledge and building the contours of the programs around them and with their initiative and participation. The balance between theory and practice, or that between scholarly discourses and field-based wisdom, is extremely important while constituting the faculty. Having a core community of faculty who is full-time, with an extended faculty drawn from practice or field on a part-time or a fixed contract basis is extremely important. Designating specific faculty positions as professor of practice, like is the case in some of the American universities, for hiring distinguished practitioners for a finite number of years will be a great idea. The future will throw up many challenges to universities, and one of them will be the ever-changing contours of knowledge. So it's important for universities not to get ossified in terms of traditional disciplines. Professor Gopinath did mention about disciplines and his own skepticisms about interdisciplinarity. I would I'm not differing, but I would like to sort of expand on it. Emergence of new knowledge happens mostly in the interstices between disciplines. Therefore, it is desirable not to have immutable departmental structures along disciplinary lines. At AUD, we established schools as indivisible spaces of multi, trans, and interdisciplinary knowledge and practice. And they were divided into programs and not departments. And these programs are constantly transforming and having finite lifetimes. It was envisaged that the programs would periodically be disrupted, dismantled, and reassembled. Faculty hiring process involved a preference given to those with transdisciplinary or multidisciplinary backgrounds. And they were given concurrent appointments in 2 or more programs and schools. All this was done with the purpose of preventing departments and schools developing as silos. In the spirit of teachers being a self-governing community, their hiring, maintaining their service documents, and their professional development were managed by a team of administrators presided over by a teacher, a dean of academic services, as opposed to this being done normally by the registrar. Academic council needs to be made dynamic and functional through 2 or 3 tiers of standing committees below it, and also statutory bodies at the school level. The student participation, and particularly at the program level and school level statutory committees, is desirable and useful. The multiple tiers of academic governance serve the purpose of checks and balances. Such a structure also serves to ensure that the academic freedom of individual teachers is appropriately circumscribed by a system of accountability in terms of peer scrutiny and student feedback. Accountability is not understood here as merely directed towards the supervisory levels of functionaries. Rather, it is directed towards the peers and the students. It is important to incorporate peer scrutiny in all academic deliberations, not merely within the institution, but also incorporating participation of academic peers outside of the institution. Dr. Gopinath did mention about the need for having outside experts on the Board of Studies. I concur with him completely. Having such participation restricted only at the level of the academic council may not be very effective. All the tiers of academic governance need to have an openness to peer scrutiny and should have institutional provisions for student feedback. Examination is the single most impeding factor in the dynamism of academic processes because of its inherent rigidity. At AUD, we deliberately did away with the centralized office of controller of examinations. Evaluation system is spread over the entire academic term, and the semester end assessment does not carry disproportionately large weightage or sanctity. The teacher herself designs the course structure, teaches, and does the assessment. Only this process is monitored in every program or in every school by the collective of peers presided over by a program director or a dean. And the whole process is constantly tweaked and moderated on the basis of student feedback. I would not say that everything has been hunky-dory with this system. It is at best a work in progress. Public institutions of higher education should not be treated as government departments. It is true that public university works with government grants. The due process of financial governance and management should be laid down, and it must be ensured that universities abide by this. However, circumscribed by the structures of financial governance, the university must be allowed the autonomy to determine what its mission and thrusts are from time to time, and how to go about it in pursuance of these. The broad mission of the university should be laid down through legislations in terms of its charter or act, and there should be a broad oversight by the equivalent of a board of regents or a board of governors, which is envisaged in the new National Education Policy 2020. Apart from that, there should be enough elbow space for the university to manage itself through a board of management, which needs to have representations of its constituents, particularly the faculty. Packing these bodies with political appointees and with bureaucrats is not a good idea at all. At AUD, we had established a convention of a policy advisory body that was non-statutory, that met regularly and critically scrutinized the existing policies and recommended new directions. The Vice Chancellor was a member of this body, but it was presided over by the senior-most professor of the university. This body evolved to be a conscience keeper for the university's leadership. Sadly, this body did not sustain beyond the first 10 years. But it's an idea worth pursuing. A complete dependence on government grant is not healthy for a public university. I would suggest that public universities should work towards moving to not more than 50% dependence on government grants for meeting its operational costs. At the same time, not more than 20% of the operational costs should be raised from student fees. And this was along the lines of what National Knowledge Commission had recommended long ago. This 20% to be accounted for by the student fees and not more than that. The remaining 30% of the operational cost is to be raised through consultancy, publications, royalty, philanthropic contributions, and so on. That's where I think management of governance and management of public universities often become an entrepreneurial endeavor. We need to also find the ways in which to meet the needs, which entirely the government grants will not be able to support. Public universities must work towards rationalizing student fee. This was what was attempted at AUD. Fee per credit is calibrated differently for different programs depending on three things: the input costs, marketability, and affordability. There is a differential structure of student fees depending on the family income. With a large number of people below a certain level of family income being completely exempted from fee paying, others on a scale, being made to give 25% or 50% or 75% of the fees. And those from the socially disadvantaged, marginalized groups were are given total fee waivers across the board. The fee indices were titrated in such a manner that after all the fee concessions and so on are deducted, it still meets the non-salary component of the operational cost of running the respective programs. A student welfare fund is also raised at AUD, from which special financial assistance is disbursed to students like in a bursary. Students participate in the management of this bursary. This was admittedly been a source of some contestations from time to time. All the same, it has been an innovation worth pursuing. Job markets are going to change drastically and become highly unstable in the next couple of decades. Every university graduates will need to upskill and reskill herself every few years. It's quite likely that she will need continuing professional development, and for this she will get back to university periodically to sign up for full-time programs or opt for own time or part-time or split site engagements through a virtual mode. Kerala's large diaspora, particularly in the Gulf states, will constitute an important clientele for continuing professional development programs for the universities in the state. To meet this challenge, universities need to get out of the more of the same kind of mindset. A robust and effective planning system needs to be put in place. This should involve institutionalizing a system of program evaluation and need appraisal involving in a major way the feedback from students, graduates, and employers. For a university that has global aspirations, it must first be organically linked with its local ecosystem. The planning process should involve strengthening of such linkages. It's very important for universities to be kept outside of political contestations and bureaucratic interferences. In a state where there are changes in the political scenario along with the electoral cycles, successive electoral cycles, it is important to ensure that these changes do not destabilize universities. Higher education is one sector that needs to work on the basis of bipartisan consensus. Institutional innovations take roots through conventions. Yes, I'm concluding.
Will you please?
I'm concluding. I'm concluding. Institutional innovations take roots through conventions, but as we have seen in some of the more established public universities in India in the recent past, it does not take much time for these conventions to disappear. It is therefore important to give a statutory character to these conventions so that these have longer and more stable life. Finally, it is about time to abandon the traditional templates based on which university acts and statutes are drafted. It is important to think anew what would be the best way of creating a facilitative statutory framework within which ideas about innovative institutional practices can constantly be generated and institutionalized through due scrutiny. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Menon. Actually, we lost some 25 minutes because of some technical hitch, but even then, we have to somehow speed up the whole thing. Now I invite Professor Daniel Little, Sociology and Public Policy, University of Michigan. Professor Daniel.
Great, thank you. I do have a set of slides, but I think rather than risk more delay, I will simply go ahead and kind of talk my way through the talk I'm able to present this evening. First of all, I want to thank the Kerala State Planning Board for inviting me to participate in this discussion. It is both an enormously interesting discussion, but also I think an enormously important discussion, both for Kerala, but also for universities in other countries, including the United States. So thank you for involving me in this discussion. My task was to talk about the issue of international teaching, research, and student collaborations. And I do have a perspective on the value of international collaboration among faculty, but also among graduate students and students across international boundaries. I'm a philosopher of social science, and so much of my own learning over a 40-year career as a philosopher of social science has been informed by conversations and discussions and interactions with scholars from other countries. I know that my thinking as a philosopher has grown much more innovative, much more insightful as a result of those conversations. So in terms of my own academic development, I know the value of international collaboration. Only 4 or 5 years ago, I had the wonderful opportunity of visiting Kerala for about a week. And it was a transformative experience, frankly. I was so happy to get exposed to the ambitions of Kerala, the achievements of Kerala over the past century, really, and also the ambitions for the future. I also have a relevant experience in the sense that I served for 18 years as chancellor of a mid-sized public university here in the state of Michigan. Chancellor is equivalent to vice chancellor. So it was very interesting to hear the vice chancellor speaking of their experience. And in my function as chancellor of the University of Michigan Dearborn, I was very involved in kind of collaborating with universities in other countries, including especially in China. But here's the bad news, which I'd like to share with you. If one had the idea that there's kind of a shortcut to establishing international relationships with US universities, there really are no shortcuts. The relationships which I think are the most productive and the most valuable are relationships which are established faculty to faculty. Sometimes it's the faculty member coming from China or India or Brazil coming to a university in the United States and forming research relationships and intellectual relationships at a research center in the United States. Sometimes those relationships then grow into a more complex, more developed plan for organized research over an extended period of time. But it is a retail operation, not a wholesale operation. Universities in the United States are highly decentralized. There's very little coordinating capacity for either public universities or private universities in the United States. Each university is its own master, basically. But it's really an even deeper decentralization than that would suggest, because within a major research university, you will also find that the schools and colleges and centers, that all of those kind of academic centers are also highly decentralized. So the upshot of that is that forming relationships between research faculty and research institutes in Kerala and universities and research centers in the United States really depends on developing those relationships in a fairly concrete, hands-on kind of way. Why would you bother? Why is it important to have international collaborations? Well, one thing which I've learned as a philosopher of social science, we tend to think of science as being pretty much the same activity worldwide, whether it's London or Kiev or Mumbai or New York or Ann Arbor. But actually, that's really not true. Scientific fields themselves are cultures, and they are embedded within cultures. They're embedded within national experiences. And there are significant, visible, and important international differences. I think, for example, of the difference in economics between the discipline of economics in the United States, which is highly mathematicized, highly neoclassical, and highly skeptical of, quote, non-orthodox approaches to economics, including Marxism, or including really the writings of Amartya Sen. The US discipline of economics is really a very closed-minded approach. And what I have learned from my economist friends trained in India is what a more open-minded, kind of human welfare-oriented discipline, the discipline of economics is. So economists in the United States, if their minds were open to learning from their economic colleagues in India, they would certainly benefit from that. I'm not sure why we're getting a phone call at this particular hour. It's dawn here in the United States. So international collaboration allows us to find connections within areas of the social sciences in particular, and allows us to arrive at new perspectives of old and important problems. International collaboration is just so powerful, so important for stimulating the diffusion of good ideas which were discovered possibly in Kerala, or possibly in Ann Arbor, or possibly in London, and then finding the ways in which they are either relevant or maybe not so relevant in other settings around the world. Universities and disciplines get better as a result of extensive international collaboration. So how would such collaboration proceed? Well, the most obvious way is something which I know that Indian academics have taken extensive advantage of, and that is to find opportunities for international study, for research fellowships, for postdoctoral fellowships, for visiting research leaves mid-career in research centers around the United States. Harvard University is a place I myself have spent a certain amount of time. Harvard is a really amazing place for fertile international collaboration. This is where I met Professor V.K. Ramachandran. Ram, hello, it's nice to see you this evening. But at Harvard in the 1990s, it was a very robust place for international discussion and frankly, a kind of sometimes a clashing of ideas about which approach is the better approach for approaching problems of economic development and agricultural and rural development. But similar experiences are possible in many different centers around the United States. Princeton University, University of Wisconsin, University of Michigan, my own home university, Berkeley, University of Pennsylvania, all of those major public and private universities are receptive destinations for international scholars to spend 2 months, 6 months, a year in depth interaction and relationship with scholars working on similar problems. But there are also opportunities like that in Chinese universities. I've had the opportunity to have visiting appointments, short visiting appointments in Chinese universities in a number of studies. And one thing I've come to realize is that Chinese departments and disciplines, political science, economics, there's a real openness to interacting with scholars from other countries. And I've found that very valuable. So how would universities in Kerala go about establishing research ties in the United States? Well, here's a positive piece of the story. Research universities have a great deal of interest in many of the research concerns, which are of a lot of interest in Kerala. So topics of poverty alleviation, topics of public health, and Kerala's very positive experience in the COVID pandemic, issues of politics, radical populism, and conflict studies. There's a lot of interest in US universities in trying to understand better the surging and worrisome power of populist movements all around the world, including in India. In a different aspect of policy studies, there's the issue of science and technology studies. How have different states, how have different polities supported and encouraged the development of science and technology studies? Something of special interest to me is studies of regulatory systems of dangerous industries. I have developed a course in recent years on organizational causes of large technology failure. And one thing I find really interesting is how the regulatory systems of India, China, the United States, France, Germany, take very different approaches to the problem of regulating dangerous industries like the chemical industry, and of course, the example of Bhopal. Looking at the natural sciences, research universities in the United States are very interested in both engineering and medicine in collaborating with researchers in countries like India, African countries, Chinese researchers, and so forth. So in other words, there's a real hunger in the United States to form these kinds of relationships. But how to do it? Well, my own perception is that the most fertile relationships develop through person-to-person, faculty-to-faculty relationships, sharing of interests, discovering then the resources both in the Kerala University and the US University, finding the resources internal to these universities to further developing research partnerships, research travel, being able to have research activity in both countries, which is then conducive to further developing the international relationship. So what I would say, and I think it comes out of many of the comments I've heard from senior administrators and faculty already this evening, that faculty are key to developing international relationships. What about students? Well, I know that US universities are very interested, in spite of the Trump administration, thankfully the former Trump administration, US universities are very interested in attracting talented students from India, from Europe, from China, to study on our campuses. And this is true across the board. It's true in the natural sciences and engineering and business, but it's also true in the social sciences and the policy sciences. And one kind of program which I was very involved in at the University of Michigan Dearborn is called a 3+2 program, where an institution-to-institution agreement is made, where students do 3 years of their study at their home university. They do the 4th year of their study at the university in the United States, and they are then invited to extend their studies through a master's degree at the US university. These 3+2 kinds of programs, University of Michigan Dearborn developed some programs like that. Other universities are doing so as well. This turns out to be a very productive experience for undergraduate students from India and China in particular. Master's and PhD level study, research universities all over the US are really hugely interested in talented students coming from countries like India, but also like Poland and like Kenya, to come and study in their programs. These programs are well advertised on the web, and this is a very directly accessible way of having either exchange programs or long-term study for talented students. I'd like to close by talking about the Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan, where I do part of my teaching. The Ford School is almost entirely a graduate school, and it has programs in Master's in Public Policy and also the PhD in Public Policy. Every year, there are a handful of talented Indian students who are in the program. And one thing which I have discovered through my teaching in the program is how valuable it is to have an Indian student or a handful of Indian students or Chinese students whose national experience is so different from the experience of US origin students. So on the topic of technology disasters, for example, Indian students have a different understanding really of the role of the state, the role of regulatory agencies, and the role of business, which kind of complements the understanding which US students have. At the Ford School, there are visiting scholar programs, which some of which are funded, others require external funding. But this is a good opportunity for talented either postdoctoral students or early career faculty to come and spend a semester or a year at the University of Michigan. There are a handful of faculty at the University of Michigan School of Public Policy who are doing research directly related to India and in India. Science and technology policy studies, poverty policy and outcomes. There are faculty at the Ford School who are doing work in those areas. So my final comment is US universities are highly decentralized. That makes it a little difficult to kind of quickly manufacture, quickly develop collaboration, but at the same time, it is a source of innovation. And I think that several of the speakers, the vice chancellors, have already spoken of the value of decentralized, less bureaucratic universities. Universities in the United States are more innovative because they are more decentralized. So I would like to thank you for involving me, and I find this a very productive conversation. I've learned more from it that I know than you have learned from my very short comments about collaboration, but I thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Professor Daniel, for that immensely educative lecture. And now the next lecture, Professor Devika, Documentation Research and Training Center, Indian Statistical Institute. Professor Devika.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes. Is
okay.
This visible to all?
Are the slides visible? Great.
Yes, yes, the slides are visible now.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, that's great. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, because participants from all over the world are here. I'm certainly very happy to be with you all this evening. And I would like to really congratulate the Kerala State Planning Board for this very timely and thoughtful initiative they have taken in looking ahead. No better time than this, where we are talking about pre and post-COVID worlds. I think that in itself is a fillip to look at what lies ahead for a state like Kerala. I thank Professor V.K. Ramachandran and Professor Gurakkal for giving me this opportunity, and hello to all the participants. So I never would have thought somebody will think about libraries in a conference like this, and that in itself, and I'm grateful for that itself over here, because this topic of library and information science support has not found a presence in conferences like this when higher education is discussed at a generic level. Now, I don't know the reason, but often enough it doesn't find a place. And it did find a place in this conference, for which I am very happy. And given that I suppose many of us attending this evening are not trained in library and information sciences, I'll give very, very short introduction to what it is. I'm aware of the paucity of time, so I'll keep my presentation very, very short, as short as possible. So this is the man. He's Professor S.R. Ranganathan, a scientist of world renown in library science, and he is called the father of library sciences, as well as several innovations for the library sector and for library research in India and world research in general, library science research in general. And he's held in very high esteem, whether we talk about India or the Western world even today. So yes, there is a domain called library and information sciences, and it is a highly interdisciplinary and a diverse field, traversing several domains, of course, library and information science, and the core of it is at the center of it, but it also transverses domains like knowledge organization and management, information and data management, digital information services, information literacy, behavioral and usage studies, scientometrics. I mean, these are some of the indicative domains that I have put over here, but the list is unending. We from the Indian Statistical Institute, particularly my department known as the Documentation Research and Training Center, we interact a lot with the European Commission and the countries under the European Union, and there and also in a worldwide alliance called the Research Data Alliance, where library and information science has taken a center stage because it is seen as a science and a discipline that has the convening power and the integrating power, and it brings together several disciplines by itself. So, but in India, unfortunately, I can't exactly say that it has taken a center seat. However, there were some formal moves way long back in India, which was good for the library sector, like this one over here. The first Public Library Act, which was the Madras Public Library Act, it was passed way back in 1948. And see, the goal of it was to introduce legal provisions for offering public library services for the public and funded by the public. Which is indeed a very great thing, thinking way back then. And following that Public Library Act, several states have their own Public Library Acts, like Karnataka, Kerala, and many of them have their own Public Library Act. So what these acts achieved was to divert a part of public money, which is tax or cess collected. For example, in Karnataka, it was the cess collected on transport. That was, I think it was about 6%, I'm not very sure, of that cess was diverted for public libraries and public library maintenance and development by the Karnataka Public Library Act. Similarly, other state acts also made provisions for the public libraries to keep funded and help in their development. Okay. But that was then, and the acts are in place, but the implementation, I mean, has been at varied levels, I can say, and public libraries have been sort of left behind. Now, coming to the significant initiatives and bodies for library and information science in India, there is, of course, the National Library situated at Calcutta, which is a beneficiary of what is known as the Delivery of Books and Newspapers Public Library Act, again way back in '54. And this library, mind you, is described even now on their website as a depository of publications in India, and nothing beyond that. Okay, so it functions as a depository, and by virtue of that act, every publication in India is deposited with the National Library. And then there is something called the InflibNet, which is an inter-university center. It is set up under the Ministry of Education. And this is a kind of an inter alia agency, and it is involved or entrusted with the duty of modernizing university libraries in India using state-of-the-art technologies and to optimize utilization of information. That's one body which is working. And then there is the RRLF, Rajaram Mohan Roy Library Foundation. This is set up under the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. And one of its chief functions is to act as an advisory body to the government on the development of library sector of the country, and to provide for financially to certain libraries in need, and also to provide technical assistance where required. Now, fast forward to about about 4 to 5 years back or more. There was in India the National Knowledge Commission, the NKC, which made several recommendations saying that India is fast moving towards what is known as a knowledge society. Hence, the National Knowledge Commission was set up. Under National Knowledge Commission, certain recommendations were made. And one of the working groups of the National Knowledge Commission was a working group on libraries and higher education. And by virtue of this, several things happened. And one thing was the National Virtual Library of India, which was recommended. And this has today taken shape of what is called the Indian Culture Portal under the Ministry of Culture. And then there is the, we have the National Digital Library, which is, which describes itself as a virtual repository of learning resources. Again, this works under the Ministry of Education. Like I just mentioned, the NKC, or the National Knowledge Commission, had particular recommendations, and one of the recommendations was setting up of a national mission for libraries, which was set up following the recommendation of the NKC. 4 working groups were set up under the NML with the focus on upgrading existing public libraries and academic libraries. Then the second focus was on library and information science education, training, and research facilities. Then setting up of the NVLI, the National Virtual Library, networking and ICT applications in a library. And the fourth was more a practical thing, which was not done before, to take a national census of libraries of India. So these were essentially the 4 working groups set up. Now I have, I did promise you that I'll keep my talk very short. So if I start critiquing the NML, it will take the better part of today and tomorrow's proceedings, so I will not. So how much we succeeded with NML is the subject of another talk. Now, looking ahead, LIS, my questions I posed to you here sometimes today, many speakers before me did mention knowledge society. Good term sounds very good. And also the term is used, knowledge economy, the other term. So is ours a knowledge society yet, is my question, or can we realize knowledge society without libraries? Okay, because whenever I've heard a discourse or somebody talking about knowledge society, I hear a disproportionate talk about resources like IT resources, infrastructure, teachers, teaching resources, learning, all this. Seldom I hear the word library in association with knowledge society. So can we create a knowledge society without libraries? And to what level should libraries rise to, actually, to be able to serve the purpose of tomorrow's knowledge society? So these are the questions. Because this conference is called Looking Ahead, I thought I should raise these questions and leave them open-ended, because I don't have the answers to this right now. But I would like our esteemed colleagues here today with us to give a thought to whither libraries. Where are Indian libraries? What is the state of affairs with libraries in this country today? So in view of that, I put down a few recommendations. These are, I do participate, like I said, nationally and internationally at fora such as the one which I'm talking at now, and I have just consolidated the views of several peers who expressed this over and over again. So the establishment of an Institute of Library and Information Science is the foremost that comes up in discussions, which I completely agree with. Hence, the recommendation is to establish the State Institute of Library and Information Science to foster scientific research and manage overall development of library sector of the state. It should be responsible for several things. Among those are the policies for the library sector, required research to sort of foster innovation, then higher education policies for library sector, of course, capacity building programs, capacity building program designs, then standards and best practices it should take care of, fostering that, and of course monitoring the library structure sector and giving advisory services that would help the development of the sector itself. So this recommendation we have also made to the national government, the government of India, to set up the NILIS, the National Institute of Library and Information Science. We do not know at what stage that is. And then to take stock of where libraries are today, like I think it was Dr. Iqbal who mentioned that Kerala is very proud of one achievement where students are going back from the private schools to public schools, back to public schools. So my question is, when will people go back to public libraries? How many of us really do visit a public library in our vicinity? How many of us would send our children for their information requirements to the public library? Or when will that day arrive? So when I have observed in more than maybe 35, 36 or 40 countries that I've been to, I have observed that the library is really much more than what we would call a repository or a depository of physical books and physical resources. It is really a hub of citizen activities. It is something like a community information service support system that exists there, which first of all draws the citizen there for several of the services that it offers. And then the information and the knowledge support it gives out of its collections that it has is invaluable to the communities. So that's how the libraries work. And that's how I envisage the public libraries of India to work. So this is the second recommendation. The State of Libraries report has to come out not only to express the state of public libraries that exist now, but vis-a-vis what exists elsewhere, whether we compare it to the US or we compare it to anywhere in Europe or China or east of India countries, anywhere, where are our public libraries and where is our library, academic library sector, for example, and how do we compare with that? This has to come.
Will you please conclude?
Yeah, this is the very last line, which must lead to the Vision Libraries 2030. The report itself should lead to the Vision Libraries. There you are. Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed being with you this evening.
Thank you, Professor Devika, for bringing library to the fore. I now invite Professor Sukhdev Thorat, Professor Emeritus, and one of the very senior scientists of the country, former chairman UGC, Professor Sukhdev Thorat.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ramchandran, for inviting me here to share, to participate.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, I thank once again for giving me an opportunity to participate in this important issue, that is the Kerala looking ahead. Now, what is there for government of Kerala to identify the issues in higher education and then build upon it? I will confine my discussion to the area where I have spent some time, and that is the issue of equal access and equity in higher education in general, but particularly in Kerala. Because we are discussing more about excellence and quality. The issue is that how we can provide an equal access and equitable access to all to the quality education. Not only access to everybody, but access to quality education. I think that is the issue that we are really confronting with. I will present before you the recent data of 2017 and 18 of National Sample Survey on Higher Education, only on Kerala, that will bring out the issues of equity in higher education and highlight the issue that confront the Kerala and how the State Planning Commission should deal with it. I will look at the issue of equity and equal access by taking three areas. Historically, we have faced the problem of unequal access to the poor vis-a-vis the economically better off section. We also have that historical legacy of denial of access to education to caste, the lower caste, and therefore the disparity between the caste exists. And we also have that historical legacy of denying education to women, and therefore the gender gap exists. Therefore, with the help of the 2017 and 18 data, I will present before you the disparity that still persists in Kerala in the enrollment ratio in higher education across the classes, across the caste, and across the gender, and then highlight some of the issues. I'll also pick up, share with you the access to the English medium education, education in higher education through English medium and the local language, because English is an important tool of progress. And at the end, I will deal with the dropout rates. Let us look at the issue of unequal access in Kerala. Now, one of the very positive aspects of Kerala's higher education development is that it has been able to achieve a relatively very high rate of enrollment ratio or educational attainment compared to any other state in India. And that goes to the Kerala, and that goes to its policies, that it has been able to expand the enrollment in higher education. Now, somebody has said that the 41% enrollment ratio in higher education is low. Probably he was right. If we take 2017 and 18, it comes with an enrollment ratio for Kerala with a 48%. Maybe it is a little higher because of the sample, maybe by 2% or so, but certainly I think the enrollment ratio in Kerala is about 45 to 46%, and that is a great achievement. But and more or less the enrollment ratio is similar between rural and area. This is remarkable of Kerala, and somebody has to explain it, and there is a lesson for the other state that the enrollment ratio in higher education is about 49% for urban and about 48% for rural. How Kerala has been able to remove that rural-urban disparity is an important issue. However, the disparities exist between the economic classes, between the caste and the gender. Now, let me take the economic classes first, very quickly. If you take the economic classes, the only way is to take the monthly per capita expenditure and then put them into quantile, 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and like that. And if we take those monthly per capita expenditure classes, what we discover is that there are considerable inequality. The enrollment ratio for 0 to 20 consumption group is about 35%, 20 to 40 is 30%, as against almost 64% for 80 to 100 income, monthly per capita income class. So despite the progressive policy in Kerala, what you see is that there is a huge gap in the enrollment ratio between the economically poor and economically lower classes as against the better off. And the gap is not simple. The enrollment ratio of those at the bottom quartile is almost half of what we have for the high income classes. So this is the first challenge that the state planning will have to face. And there is other statistic that we get with respect to the classes is that we have a data on the household type. We have self-employed, those who are engaged in business, farming and business, and the regular salaried and the casual labor. These are the three occupational categories which the national sample survey gives. And what you discover is the enrollment ratio is the highest, about 58% for the regular salaried. Obviously, they can afford that. And self-employed comes with a 52%, but the enrollment ratio on casual labor is only 33%. So the differences again comes out quite clearly between the laboring classes and the business and the regular salary. This is the challenge for the policymaker, that how you bring the enrollment ratio of casual wage laborer on par with the regular salaried or self-employed. Now, this is what the message is as far as the economic disparities in access to enrollment based on the economic classes are concerned. When we switch over to caste, similar disparities are visible. But I must mention the positive aspect of the Kerala education development is that the enrollment ratio for the scheduled caste, particularly, is higher than that of other states, including if I take my own state of Maharashtra. But Kerala has not been able to remove the disparity, its historical legacy of disparity in access to education between the high caste and the low caste and the tribal and non-tribal. As against the state average of 48%, the enrollment ratio among the scheduled caste is about 41%. But if you compare it with the high caste enrollment ratio is 80%. And that of scheduled caste is about 40%. The scheduled caste enrollment ratio is almost half of that of higher caste. And of course, the story of tribal is more pathetic. The enrollment ratio of scheduled tribe is 22% as compared to 80% for the high caste. I think this is a major challenge. The Kerala, which is very progressive and the socialist policies, it has not been able to remove the disparities between the caste as such. However, it has been able to remove the disparities between male and female. The difference between male and female in gender is very, very low. I think 50% for, in fact, the enrollment ratio for female is higher than the male, 50% for female and 47% for male. If this national sample data is true, and I believe it is true, it's a remarkable achievement of the Kerala, that it has been able to push up the enrollment ratio of female vis-a-vis the male. I think this is also the story of all India and other states. The informal affirmative action policy for the female, which is not visible, has really paid us and reduced the gap, gender gap between male and female. But the Kerala has done still better, that the enrollment ratio of female, as a matter of fact, exceeds that of male. Now, last point I will make and then go to the other point is that, then I will go to the other point, namely that what are the other dimension of the inequality and which are the sources of inequality, unequal access to higher education. And that is the privatization of the higher education in Kerala and as well as the other states. I think I'm a little surprised by some of the speakers spoke about, keep silent about the privatization and unequal access that is brought in Kerala. Because I think my experience when I was the chairman of UGC and I was asking some of the eminent scholar and the leader from Kerala that please deal with the issue of privatization, and they were left, obviously. They were reluctant to accept it. And I did not get, they were reluctant to take any issue. Then 5 to 6 years later, I was told the reason as to why I don't get a positive response, the reason was that the left itself was a party to the privatization, private policies of privatization, and then thereby causing inequality. So let me share with you the 2017 and 18 figure as such. We can take, there are three types of government, there are three types of institution in higher education. One is the government, the public sector. Education has been the source of providing equal opportunity to the poor and the non-poor in Kerala as well as in the country. So government institution, then we have developed a very fantastic categories of institution called private aided. That they are private, but they are supported by the state and they follow the same policy which are followed by the public sector. So sometimes we can call it a public-private partnership, but that has been a fantastic model. But recently, after the early 90s, we introduced a model of self-financing institution that is private, really purely private. And these self-financing institutions are supposed to raise their own resources. And this institution can basically rely upon the student. So we should call them as a student financing institutions. Now, if we look at that and see the access, then we have to, we can get an idea as to what is the sources of how private sector has resulted into the unequal access to the education. Now, I am surprised that in Kerala, of the total student in the higher education, almost 41% are in the self-financing institution, followed by 31% of private aided, and government is only 27%. So you can see that over a period of time, I have not calculated the rate of change. Over a period of time, the private sector, government sector has reduced to just less than 1/3. And the private sector, self-financing private sector is touching almost 41%. That's fine, no problem. Government aided is about 31%. As long as the privatization of higher education is providing an equal access to the poor and the lower caste and the women, there is no problem. But that is not the case. If I provide you data, what we find is that the self-financing, the student from low caste and the poor and the girls have gained an unequal access to the higher education in the state of Kerala. I will give you the share of the student by the income categories. Let me take the income categories first. You can see that at the bottom end of the monthly per capita consumption expenditure, bottom end, the share of the student in the private institution is about 21% for 0 to 20 and about 44% for 20 to 40. These are the bottom classes. And if you compare with them with the top class, 80 to 100 quintile monthly per capita consumption, it is 51%. So you can see that the ratio of a portion of the student going to the private institution is much lower among the bottom classes compared to the top classes. There is another indicator which we can take and see that what is the share of the student in the private institutions, self-financing institution. I must share that in Kerala, of the total student in the private institution, self-financing institution, almost 50% of them are on the top income classes, 80 to 100 quintile. So half of the students come from the rich, and only 1.8% come from 0 to 20, and 6.1% come from 20 to 40. So just 7 to 8% of the total students in the private colleges are from the poorer section. Now, so you can see that either you take the share, horizontal share or vertical share, the access to the poorer section is much, much less in the self-financing institution. And remember well that self-financing institution provide professional education, cutting-edge courses and all that. And so to that extent, the quality may not be as high as some of the public institutions, but they are offering education in areas which provide improve employability and use market. Now come to the scheduled caste, and the story is the same. The gap is not very high, but nevertheless there is a gap between the scheduled tribe and the scheduled caste share vis-a-vis the high caste share. OBC are doing exceptionally well as far as the access to the private institution is concerned. You have to look for that. Higher caste, of course, are getting better access. One of the important points that I must like to share with you, and which is surprising, but which need expression, that the share of the total student of the Muslim community going to higher education, 45% of them are private aided, private unaided or self-financing institution. Although their enrollment rate is lowest, I have not shared with you the enrollment rate of Muslim. The enrollment rate of Muslim is just closer to the scheduled tribe in Kerala. They are lagging behind. But whosoever goes to the higher education institution, a very high proportion of them goes to the self-financing institution. The explanation seems to me is the minority institution, that the minority institution gives access to the Muslim, the private institution. And there I have generated the additional table. I won't take a time. There is a divide among the Muslims. The economically better of Muslims are able to send their children to the minority institution owned by the Muslims, as compared to the poor class among the OBC, among the Muslims. The OBC lags behind compared to the other Muslim classes. But I think they at least do much better compared to in having an access to the private institution. Possibly the Christians are doing still better. I don't have a data for the lack of sample. Now, this is the story of privatization, that how privatization has led to unequal access. It has aggravated. Even in public institutions, relatively better off section go into higher education, but the private education has aggravated. And in Kerala, where the private education has expanded at a very, very rapid state in Kerala compared to India or compared to other states, In other states, at all India, only 16% of the students goes in the self-financing colleges compared to the 41% in Kerala. And that access is unequal. Now, this is the important issue. If you want to go ahead in education, you have to lift up the poor. How do you provide the equal access to the private student, student to the private institution and to the scheduled caste is an issue which I think will be on the table of Dr. Ramchandran when they develop the policies. Now, I go to the last section. That is the language. Language being a very important tool of progress and better education. If you have a higher proportion of students going into the going through the English medium school, then you have an advantage. Now, if we look at the figure, it is a mind-boggling figure for Karnataka, for Kerala. In 2017 and 18, of the total student in higher education, almost 92% have done education through English medium. So this talk of teaching in English, teaching regional language is something which is not correct. I think we hide our weaknesses because we develop complexes. So 92% student goes to the English medium, and only less than 1% in Hindi and about 8% in others, which is the regional language. There are no disparities between male and female, but there are disparities in case of caste. That the relatively lower proportion of the scheduled caste, not the tribe, relatively lower proportion of the scheduled caste goes to the regional language, Malayalam, and goes to relatively less proportion of the scheduled caste student goes to the English medium and depend more on the regional language as compared to, say, 96% of high caste, 92% of OBC. So if English is taken as one of the indicators of better quality education, the scheduled caste lag behind. Tribals are doing better. I don't know the reason why it is that tribals are doing better and they are able to send their children to the higher education in English medium. As far as the income classes are concerned, the lower income classes also have relatively lower proportion of the student going through the English medium school as compared to the top income classes. This is also revealed by, if you take the occupation, a relatively lower proportion of the casual labor goes to the English medium school compared to the regular salaried and the self-employed student. Now, I'll take a last indicator and I stop it. The dropout. The interesting figure is that 2017 and 18 NSS survey gives you the dropout rate. General conclusion is that the dropout rate is high among the poor, dropout rate is high among the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, but there are no differences between male and female. The dropout rate is more or less similar. So I will stop the conclusion here, the analysis here, and share with you very briefly in 2 minutes the policy implication that confront the State Planning Commission in the coming future, or how they should go ahead. This is I think this data make it relatively easy for me to indicate the policy conclusions. First policy conclusion is that if we want to go forward in higher education, the policy for the poor and low income group is necessary. Whatever policy you have, with that policy, the gap persists. And the gap I have given you with the figure. So the lower income group enrollment rate is lower. Their access to self-financing institution is lower. And their access to English medium education is lower. And therefore, and the dropout rate is high. So Kerala has to develop a policy, improve and reform its policy for the poor students, which they have already. They will, obviously, they cannot revert back the privatization. 41% of the student goes, and I do not have the figure of the institution, because the privatization has political economy. People, those who are in power also own some of the institute, or their interest holder private institutions. So that is a political economy issue, which is very difficult. So you will have to deal with the issue that while keeping the private institution, minority institution of Muslim and Christian, you will have to develop a policy whereby you provide an equal access, similar access to the lower income group. And I think somebody has referred, I think Menon has referred about, or I think Varghese has mentioned about the fees. You will have to have a differential policy that you take more from the relatively economic better classes and subsidize it for the lower person. That is the institutional level fee policy. But I think state government will have to develop certain policy. I do not know the policies of the poor, because one of the policies of the public sector institution, but the public sector institution share is only 27%. So that is one lesson. You will have to develop a policy if you have to provide an equal access to quality education. Talking about excellence, talking about quality, unless you talk about equal access to the poor is meaningless, because that will create, education will create economic inequality also. Let me finish and then I will make a final remark. Similarly, you will have to have a policy for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, that they continue to lag behind. They have progressed. The remarkable success story of the Kerala higher education is that the enrollment ratio of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe has also improved over a period of time along with the higher caste. And that rate is higher than many state or all India average for the scheduled caste. But the gap persists. It means that what is required, the bottom line is this. The rate of increase in the enrollment rates of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe and the lower income group, irrespective of caste and religion, will have to be higher than that of higher caste. Then the gap will be reduced. So the present policy is not giving the higher rate of increase in the higher education. As a result, the gap persists, and gap persists to a significant extent, disturbing extent, unacceptable extent. The enrollment ratio of scheduled caste being less than half of a higher caste, or the same is the gap in the poor. So the policy for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, how to increase their enrollment rate, how to improve their access to the self-financing institution, and how to reduce their dropout rate is the challenge for the higher education policy. Similarly, the Muslim enrollment rate is low, much lower compared to other groups, although their access to the self-financing institution is good because of the minority institution. See, these are the issues, I think, which the Kerala higher education policy will have to address. The most difficult problem, which the central government, with all its talk of excellence and quality, is bypassing the issues of equity. Even in new education policy, it talks about equal access and equity, but it doesn't provide the solution. In fact, the policy measures that are provided by the new education policy will aggravate the inequality. I don't have a time to discuss that policy. I have written somewhere else. But I will conclude by saying that the unequal access in higher education will result in the unequal improvement in the capabilities for employment. Or those who do education, they also do good business, because education has a lot of externality. You know, if you have higher education, people are educated, they can get employment, but they do better business, better farming, and better thing in life. So if you have unequal attainment in higher education, it results to unequal opportunity, employment opportunity, and then unequal income. And education it is becoming now a source of economic inequality. And if we want to talk of reducing poverty and economic inequality, we have to deal with the issue of unequal access to higher education, simply because I am an economist and I have run several regression of poverty and low income and taken several factors. Access to higher education emerges as an important variable, whichever indicator you take. I think this is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Thorat, for bringing disturbing truth to the attention. I need hardly tell you how short time we are, and I'm constrained to skip the next session of comments and discussion. I'm advised to do that. If some of the listeners have comments, they may please send the comments and inquiries to the State Planning Board. I am skipping the session for concluding remarks. So I straight away invite Dr. Bindu for the...
Sir, Dr. Sudhir is, sir, for
Uh,
this company.
I am advised by the Vice Chairman to
Okay.
conclude this session. So
Let Dr. Sudhir, please let Dr. Sudhir speak. We want to hear Dr. Sudhir. No?
Okay. Then I request Dr. Sudhir for comments, please.
Thank you. I think it's already we are running by 45 minutes late, I guess. We can still, I'll just quickly say something.
Yeah, please.
We had a very interesting discussion on different topics on higher education by eminent speakers. And I feel that the topics of discussions were chosen appropriately and covered the entire spectrum of higher education. As you all know, Kerala has a vibrant higher education system with 15 state universities, 2 central universities, 1 deemed university, and several centrally funded institutions. It's important to note that the gross enrollment ratio in higher education institutes of Kerala is higher than the national average. Ideally, these institutes have 3 roles: knowledge generation, knowledge dissemination, and knowledge application. We have been focusing on the latter 2, that is dissemination and talent development. The application of knowledge to transform the society has received little attention. The objective of quality education for all has much relevance at the level of higher education as the level of as is at the level of school education. Inclusive development of the state is premised on inclusive development of higher education too. The economic development of the state, constrained by its limited land and natural resources and high density of population, is increasingly becoming linked up with the knowledge-related industries and services. Curricular reforms should necessarily begin with reforms in pedagogy. The students should get opportunities for acquisition of existing knowledge and generation of new knowledge. Written assignments, seminars, problem-solving sessions, projects, field studies should become integral to any reform in the pedagogy. The developments in information and communication technology should be put into service both to improve the quality of learning and access to learning. And this was envisaged in the state education policy. The possibilities of e-learning have to be exploited to the fullest extent as we continue to improve the quality and quantity of education through the face-to-face modes. Similarly, the traditional face-to-face mode can be further improved by integrating the information communication technology to the curriculum. This would require a continual program of intensive and extensive exposure to the new pedagogy of learning to teachers as well as students, and also additional investment for providing new infrastructure. The institutions of higher learning have 3 key functions: teaching, research, and extension. While universities and colleges have recognized these 3 functions, the synergies among these are not properly appreciated. As mentioned by the moderator in the beginning, there is a tendency to compartmentalize them and to exclusively reserve each one of them to separate groups of teachers and students. We have good teachers, good researchers, and good extension workers, but rarely teachers and students who combine in themselves all these diverse roles. While specialization is inevitable in higher education and everyone cannot be expected to excel in all the 3 fields, the attempt should be to combine all 3 roles, perhaps at different periods in the career of both students and teachers. The vision document of 2030 Higher Education of Kerala has underscored the importance of education in the development of the Kerala economy to reach a growth rate of 7.5%. Accounting for 50% of India's exports in education service by 2030, it is expected that with global knowledge cities in Kerala, Kerala will be a key node to global knowledge network by 2030. It will be in the league of the top ranked countries in terms of efficiency, competitiveness, services, and market delivery in education. While these goals are laudable, the strategies that Kerala adopts to reach these goals need to be carefully formulated. Kerala can learn from its own experience in school education. The state has built up a strong universal school education system, essentially based on public and government-aided system and not relying completely on private sector. And one of the most important dimensions of widely acclaimed social progress of Kerala owes to the school system. In a recent interaction with the experts in education sector, the Chief Minister of Kerala, Pinarayi Vijayan, has said that the government will soon initiate steps for a comprehensive overhaul of the higher education sector, promising measures to expediting the proposals that figured in the state budget. He said state universities and other major institutions will be upgraded as centers of excellence. Infrastructural facilities will be enhanced at these centers to help students maximize their potential. He stressed the need to introduce reforms that could attract Keralite students who aspire to pursue higher education in other states. At a later stage, efforts would be made to attract youngsters from abroad to the state. In conclusion, the state is marching towards excellence in higher education. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for the remarks, Dr. Sudhir. I think we have no time for general discussion. Dr. Bindu, are there any questions in the chat box?
Yeah, no, sir. One comment is there that from one Dr. Tara S. Nair, that is with respect to teacher education curriculum, it would be appreciable if curricular reforms and university collaborations could be implemented after unification of syllabus statewide. Moreover, strengthening of quality should be more productive at UG level, which is in most cases are getting diluted.
It's a statement sort of thing, and then as some of the speakers already shed light on this.
Then we produce engineers, not scientists. It's the biggest concern in Kerala. That's also a comment. And
yeah, the pity is that we are not producing engineers. We are only producing engineering graduates. I do not know how many scientists we are creating. That's a different issue. Anyway, I think we are really short of time. Certainly, we started a little late, and then we had technical hitch. But anyway, I just have one statement by way of concluding the whole thing. That is only conveying immense gratitude to Dr. V.K. Ramchandran, the Honorable Vice Chairman of the State Planning Board, for rendering plausible an excellent session on higher education like this. And we are immensely grateful to all the experts who made brilliant presentations. Now, with these words, I invite Dr. Bindu Varghese for vote of thanks.
Sir, now we have reached the end of a very insightful session. I think the session was indeed a very resourceful session on higher education. I'm sure the points raised here have given a much better vision on higher education as such with regard to its promises and challenges. And this fruitful discussion will surely give better insights while framing the higher education policies in the state. With this, let me come to the responsibility assigned to me. On the first onset, on behalf of the State Planning Board, let me thank Sri K.T. Jalil, Honorable Minister of Higher Education, for his presence and opening remarks. I would also like to express our deep gratitude to Professor Rajan Gurikal for chairing the session. I am sure all of gathered here will agree with me that Professor Gurikal's erudite remarks have considerably added to the value base of today's discussions. Thank you, Professor Rajan Gurikal. The distinguished speakers today have their views on different aspects of higher education, like curricular and institutional innovations, potential of MOOC in higher education, networks in teaching, research and student exchanges, innovations in library and information availability, and social inclusion. I extend my department's sincere gratitude to Professor Gopinath Ravindran, Professor Ronald J. Herring, Professor N.V. Varghese, Professor Shambi Menon, Professor Daniel Little, Professor Devika P. Madali, and Professor Sukhdev Thorat. I also take this opportunity to thank today's discussant who, through his keen observation, contributed creatively to today's discussion. Thank you, Dr. Sudhir. I extend my sincere thanks to Dr. B. Iqbal, member Kerala State Planning Board, for delivering the welcome address. He has guided us at each and every step of this event. I also take this opportunity to thank our Honorable Vice Chairperson, Professor V.K. Ramachandran, who has played a central role in organizing this whole event from its conception. The delegates and participants for this session include eminent personalities, scholars, and academicians, and also students from various institutions inside and outside the country. Many of them have participated through our YouTube and Facebook live pages. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of them for being part of this session. Lastly, the success of any conference is mainly indebted to the hard work of the team members. Hence, I thank my colleagues in Social Service Tuition State Planning Board who work hard to make this session a success. Once again, thank you all.
Thank you, Bindu.
Sir, can we end the session?
Yeah. Let us conclude the meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.